I'm Colleen Kruger from Music Calgary, and you're watching our episode 3 of our inspiration series. Sound Off Music Talks is presented by Music Calgary, and we'd like to acknowledge the projects funded in part with Factor and the Government of Canada and Canada's private radio broadcasters. And I'd also like to take a moment to recognize Music Calgary is located in Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Today we'll be talking with Gareth Smith, who's the VP of Sub Pop Publishing. So I'm going to pass the mic to Gareth to do an introduction of who and what he does. Who are you and what do you do, Gareth?
You just did it for me. That's exactly who I am. I run the publishing division of Sub Pop Records. Anyone that doesn't know, Sub Pop Records is a medium-sized independent record company based in Seattle, Washington, perhaps best known for flogging grunge music originally, bringing that to the world via lots of bands you would have heard of. And then more recently, we work with bands like Beach House and Father John Misty, the publishing division.
Calgary band, Cartel Madras.
Cartel Madras, and we work with His Royal Highness Chad Van Galen, and we work with the publishing division is a little bit separate from the label, but we kind of all work in kind of conjunction, especially with A&R stuff.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've been starting all of these. So the whole part of these talks is to get an inspiration of why people work in music and how they got started. Because I feel it's necessary with everything that's going on in the world. So yeah, we started off with, what was your aha moment? How did you get started in music? Is it possible to talk closer to the mic?
Is that better? I don't know where the mic is. Maybe down here. Is that better?
It's still quiet. Maybe it's just my side.
I could speak louder.
Does it sound okay on everyone's? Well, they're good.
So my aha moment, I don't know if it was a moment, but it's like a series of moments when I was about 16, 17. And I was essentially failing high school. It was called secondary school in England. Not particularly sort of interested. And at the same time, I became kind of less interested in high school or secondary school. Like music kind of took over in different ways. The two ways I'd say it took over really are I was playing music, so I was in a band, and I would go out a lot, as lots of young people did. But having gone from being quite a dorky, kind of wanting to work in sports science, to kind of growing up, suddenly going out to clubs and to shows and being like, oh my God. And this was like the late 90s in London, so you can imagine the sorts of bands and things that I was kind of going to, and kind of made a whole new kind of set of friends. And yes, there's probably like 2 or 3 years that kind of really changed my life in that sense.
Nice. Do you remember like the first band you saw that gave you
first? I mean, I know it sounds cheesy, but the first band big show I ever went to when I was 16 was Oasis at Nebworth. And that was like the height of what it was in Britpop, you know, the history will tell you it's the height of Britpop. And like, I just remember the scale of it and just having my ears pinned back and being like, oh my God, this is incredible. And just having fun with my friends, you know, that was a big part of it, was just kind of the fun. Like, we didn't stay inside and like geek out about records, which is totally fine if you do that. We were kind of out having fun. And then from that, I'd say I kind of went on this kind of path of playing music, ended up kind of failing all my exams and kind of pivoting to do like a music performance course, and I did that. Spent a year doing that and playing. I was a drummer, and I played the drums every day because I was the only drummer on the course. So I met a ton of people from all over the world who were kind of doing the same sort of thing as me, and yeah, it was an incredible kind of just experience, just to meet people, play different types of music, kind of put myself out of my comfort zone and kind of get good at playing the drums. That's what it was all about.
Nice. Was that when you started playing drums, or you've been playing?
I've been playing for a while, but like it'd always been in the background. And then when I joined the band and did that, it all kind of came together at once, I'd say.
Yeah. What was your band name?
That is confidential information. Nice try that.
Yeah. What kind of music did you play? Trying to bury it.
I'm not even going to go there, but yeah, we played in and around London for like a few years, way back. Cool. And then from there, I did a music business degree because it kind of coincided. Like again, they were on the lookout for someone to play the drums, I think, and I knew then maybe music business is what I wanted to do, and that was kind of like, so I got into this music course at Westminster University in London, and that was like a different level of playing every day, hanging out with or being on the course with people that already signed in bands or had been signed, and it's just a different kind of level, and people that were running their own little companies or you know had already experienced the things that I was kind of excited about. So did that, and then towards the end of that course, I specialized. You have to kind of specialize, think about what you're going to specialize in, and I kind of started thinking about music publishing, because it sounds really boring, but I was like, I really want to get a job. Like I know that's like what's next after this, and music publishing seemed a safe place to get a job. At the time, like this is like 2003. Like a lot of people on the course wanted to do jobs in marketing or A&R or like these kind of like cool jobs, and I was like, I need to pay the rent, so I'm not going to put myself like in that big competitive pool. I'm going to like go over here and try and get a job in publishing, which was a bit slower, kind of not what it is kind of now. Like sync licensing was not a big thing really, kind of just growing. So my last year, I did an internship that got me a job, basically.
Oh, nice. So yeah, UK is quite unique in the way that you have a lot of like music courses, like early on in education. So like high school or pre-university kind of style schools, like the whole school is art focused or business art focused.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, sorry, we don't have.
I was going to say that the course, the original course I did was designed so that it was part-time, which meant that anyone on the course, it was like the maximum numbers of hours that qualified as part-time. So anyone on the course could actually do the course and then claim any sort of government benefits they needed to, or go and work and look after their families, whatever else. It was, I don't know if that's, at the time, there's a thing called Music New Deal, which kind of supported musicians, and it was. I don't think that's a thing now. I can't imagine that as a thing now. But it was. I was so lucky to kind of do this course. It was essentially free.
Yeah, amazing. So you started going to that course when you were 16.
I was a bit. I maybe 18, but I definitely like post high school. Yeah, like a college.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then they were able to like educate you about publishing within that course or within the school. Or did you get like an internship or?
That was it. So my last year, I did an internship at a music supervision company, which is actually part of the course. You had to go and do an internship and do a certain number of hours in a semester. So I did that, and actually the first job I ever got came from the internship recommending me. Because I don't know, I got on there and they kind of put me in line for this job, and I went for this interview, and a company called Chrysalis Music, and I got a job as the most junior job you can get in the company, basically, that wasn't in the post room.
Nice. Copy runner.
Yeah, basically,
What did
like,
you do?
I was like, at the time I was doing, this is pre kind of, I was pre the internet, but it's pre sharing music digitally. So, you know, we would be copying tens and hundreds of CDs, you know, with a CD copier, stuffing envelopes, um, you know, keeping diaries for senior people, and yeah, I just put my head down for about 2 years and really like worked as hard as I could at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So learned everything you needed to know.
Yeah, that like that really was it. Like, you know, you had to, you know, in that first job, it's like a glorified internship, and I still think that's probably similar for a lot of people now, where you can have experience and you can kind of study, but it wasn't until I actually, on my first day of work, did I understand what it was all about. Like, everything else was kind of in principle until then.
Nice. To be honest, I don't know much about publishing. Even though I've worked in music for 10 years, I still sometimes am very perplexed by publishing and rights, and the amount of avenues to go within that bubble is
Excellent.
like a vast sea to me. I'm like, what? Yeah.
Do you want me to explain what publishing?
Maybe like simplify publishing, because I think it's like a question mark in a lot of people's minds.
And that is something I hear a lot, you know, as a publisher. You know, bands will ask me when I ask them, like, have you figured out your publishing? Mm-hmm. And it's almost like, it's like I'm a tax man and they don't want to think about it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's like doing your taxes. They're like, yeah, we'll figure that out. And I'm like, no, it's the other way around. It's like your money you're going to get. You're not paying.
Yeah, exactly. Like, publishing is where money can hide.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it,
it can hide. It does hide. Yeah.
It can hide there. So doing it is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing I always say, like, I work with a ton of bands that are just starting out, you know, like, and it's something I'm constantly bugging bands about to understand, because it is something that, you know, the amount of money you receive, unless you're like Elton John or Queen or something, you probably couldn't live off it nowadays if you're just like a, you know, medium-sized indie band. But you could probably, over a few years, fund a tour, or if you're kind of doing better than that, put a deposit on a house or something. It's like, it's meaningful. Mm-hmm. But if you don't collect it, it doesn't. There's not a check with your name on sitting somewhere. You know, you have to really figure it out.
Totally. So yeah, we can simplify publishing.
So publishing is the business of collecting and administering income associated with your songs and your songwriting. If you think a record label owns and exploits recordings because they've paid for you to go to a studio, and then they own the recording and they sell that recording. On that recording is a song that you've written or has been written. Publishing collects the money that is due, that is earned when that song is exploited, basically. And that kind of exists in a few different ways. The main one normally is when you sell a record or stream on Spotify, but every time you play a show live, there's money to collect. If someone covers you, there's money to collect. If someone samples you, there's money to collect. A lot of that money is collected via what are called PROs, and I won't kind of get too far into it, but essentially every time your song is played in public, either in a store or a bar or a cafe, a Starbucks, whatever, there is money for you due, and those places have to pay money to play songs in public. Mm-hmm. So as you can imagine, it's like lots of little bits of income that over a period of time, it can add up.
Totally. I know. So even just talking about it, I'm like, whoa. If that just like levels it out for everyone, that I'm overwhelmed by it equally.
It is, but then everyone has like a moment where they're like, I get it. I get it. It's kind of like you just have to keep going until you get it.
Yeah. So it's a matter of like tracking proper information and just sort of getting ahead of it. Like,
yeah. So for everyone who might be watching who's in a band or an artist in Canada, the first thing you do is speak to the Canadian Performing Rights Organization, which is SOCAN, SOCAN, and Google that, and then I'm gonna be pretty sure there's enough information on their website to get you started if you're a songwriter.
Yeah, cool. That's a good angle to take. Start at SOCAN.
Yeah. Don't ask me. Don't ask Colleen.
Don't ask me. I will figure it out with you. We could figure it out together. I'm always into learning. I think it's important. But yeah, so what brought you? So anyway, we'll go back to your story. I'd rather hear about your story and not stress out about publishing. But if anyone does have questions, please always reach out and we can figure it out together. So yeah, you were in a band. You started working in publishing like right out the gate. And how long have you been working in publishing?
So it must be year 18 now. I spent maybe 17, and I spent about 7 years at this company called Chrysalis Music, which at the time, the beginning of the 2000s, had like Portishead, we had Aphex Twin, we had Outkast, we had Yeah Yeah Yeahs, we had Fleet Foxes, we had Blondie, we had Billy Idol. We had this incredible like roster of really good songwriters, I'd say. We had Rod Temperton, who wrote the whole of the Thriller record for Michael Jackson way back when, and Billy Idol. And it was my job. So the other bit about publishing that's kind of the most interesting, perhaps, is the idea of putting your songs in a TV show or a film or an advert. It's a big part of how money can be made in publishing. Every time that happens, there's the people placing the song in the film or the TV show have to pay what's called a license fee, and it was my job to figure those that out. So I did that at Chrysalis. Chrysalis was then sold to a company called BMG. So I went from this kind of indie company to this huge kind of global corporate company. And then after 3 years of working there, which was an interesting experience, the difference between an indie company and a major company, I moved to America, which is where I am now.
Nice. So you've always been on, well, I know where you live, but you've always been on I think I know where you live. You live in LA, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you've been in Seattle before as well.
Yeah, so I lived in LA, and I moved to Seattle for about nearly 2 years, and then moved back to LA about 3 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
And LA makes sense, just more for the Hollywood and the sync and the video and.
Yeah, given that so much of what publishing, the creative side of publishing, is kind of either co-writing, creating new songs and trying to place those songs in TV shows and films and stuff, like that whole business is here. Netflix and Amazon and HBO, whoever else, they're all kind of based here. Yeah.
Nice, cool. Do you ever see yourself going back to the UK?
Maybe. Yeah, we'll see. I quite like it here, though. It's kind of it's one of those cities where if you can figure it out in terms of work and life, it's great. But if you can't, it's the opposite of great. And I think I figured it out.
Nice.
So yeah,
that's good.
If you can figure it out, it's great. Yeah.
So you lived there for a bit. You went back to Seattle. So then you're only been back to LA for a couple of years now.
Yeah, exactly.
So how are things? Well, we can get into it a little bit. Maybe how are things rolling now?
So
slowed down.
What's in terms of the current like
publishing or sync or any of that stuff?
So since the whole COVID thing has happened, publishing, we're fine, because publishing essentially collects its money from sources that are not affected too much at the moment. So people are still streaming music, pretty much. If anything, that's going up, which
Yeah.
kind of helps us. People are still making TV shows. That is kind of, we're starting to see that slow down a little bit, and films, but adverts are still being made. People are just getting smart as to how they make them, and that all requires music. So it's been okay. But yeah, I mean, a large part of what I do and what lots of people in music do is you're going to shows, hanging out and you're networking. That's been tough.
Totally. I know that's a huge part of our lives in general.
Yeah, like traveling, and I'm normally like, I travel quite a lot for work, and it's a big part of the way that I do business, and it's tough right now. But
totally. Yeah, it's hard to make those new connections, but it's definitely strengthening any established ones, or
yes.
Yeah, so like you have more time to actually like dig into things.
Yeah.
So that's been nice. There's parts of it that are nice. But yeah, I feel I miss traveling a lot. This is me traveling now. I'm like, oh, you're in LA?
The internet.
Cool. Mara was in Venice, It's pretty sweet. But yeah, so like, if in the world of publishing, what kind of advice would you give anybody that would be looking to get into it, or artists exploring their publishing?
So people wanting to work in publishing, there are so many different areas of publishing that you can work in. I'd recommend like trying to figure out exactly where you'd want to work. There are a lot of kind of subsidiary companies as well now, or concepts related to publishing, just in terms of like tech, for instance, companies that are helping other companies collect money. The process of collecting money is super complicated. There are companies that help with sharing music, business to business companies that kind of store and share music and help the creative people do their jobs. There are jobs in licensing, trying to place the music. There are jobs in royalty. Like, there's a whole bunch of different things. So kind of figuring out what you want to do before you do anything else, like just generically wanting to work in music or work in publishing isn't going to help. Like, I get sent, like, if I advertise for a job, which I sometimes do, for help here, and I'll get like resumes from people who are just like, I just want to work for Sub Pop and in music. And I'm like, that's not what the job description, like, that's cool. Thank you. But like, that's not what the job description says, So
studious. Do you like details? Do you like do you like chasing artists for details?
Exactly.
Qualities in a person.
And then I guess the other thing that's really important is like, there are so many different publishers that do different kind of things. So figure out whether you want to work for a big company or a small company. Whether you personally like it's always much more interesting to work with artists that you like and love. So looking at their rosters and being like, hey, these are all bands that I want to work with. Like, your day is much more fun and interesting if you kind of believe in the bands you're working with, and not just kind of, it will become like any other job otherwise. You have to kind of have some enthusiasm.
Yeah, a lot of enthusiasm and just like natural passion for the work.
Yeah.
Is necessary. Yep.
And like, I wouldn't say that like generic letter writing works, but trying to make yourself useful in terms of an internship or stuff like that can help, or being in touch with people, going to conferences where people like me are speaking on panels. I never mind people getting in touch as long as it's kind of like a gentle kind of email or something, or hit me up on LinkedIn. If it's your approach is like generic, like I can sense that, people can sense that. So like being specific is always good.
Yeah, I would say that on like any side of the business is like, be genuine, be authentic, like approach people with honest questions and like knowledge seeking, because people are busy, time's valuable. So like be cautious of that. But we're all like sort of open door kind of policy if someone approaches
Yeah,
Just
exactly. And I quite like the plucky email. Like, you know, if you can get it right, I'm always like, that's awesome. Like, if I can help, I will, you know. It's just when it's like, dear sir, madam, you know, please listen to my band. I'm like, come
please listen to my
on.
band and make me money. You're like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's not how this works. Okay.
Exactly. And I think a lesson for like if you want to work in music generally, like, you know, ultimately there are no, like, you don't need a qualification to work in music, right? You can just in theory figure it out and, you know, end up running a big old company. I'm sure, I think what's his face that runs Universal started in the post room. I'm pretty certain that's a thing. And it was just because it was the local, he
Yeah,
like lived near to Universal, like that was it. And he was like, oh, I work in the post room.
totally. Yeah, it's definitely an industry that's like you can work in it if you build your skills and knowledge
Yeah.
and just
So,
like genuinely are interested in talking or researching and figuring stuff out.
yeah.
That's
And
basically what we're all doing. We're like,
yeah, keep learning, keep learning. And like, and as much as I'm advocating for like starting at the ground up and finding out like, you know, some sort of internship or somewhere where you're kind of learning on the job, don't feel obliged to do that. I also believe that internships sometimes they're not the most useful in terms of learning. Sometimes you're doing something which the company should be paying someone to do, and unless you're learning, like, don't do it. Don't like be free work. It has to be like actually beneficial to you. So that's my internship caveat. Don't like if you're stuffing envelopes for 5 days a week and they're not buying, you're not giving any money like that. You're not learning anything. You can stuff envelopes and get paid for it like somewhere else.
yeah, true, totally.
Don't get carried away with that kind of
Like
idea.
the pay your dues model
Yes.
of internship.
Yeah.
Paying my
Like,
dues and just stuffing envelopes.
yeah, it's like you want to be learning and you want to find a way of making yourself, you know,
Yeah.
useful.
Show up and say, hey, what can I do? Like
Yes.
sometimes you just have to do that. And people will be like, whoa, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then jobs are created by people showing
Yeah.
up and offering help.
I've definitely, I mean, I know that I've employed people like that many times before. If I can, and if you make yourself invaluable, like, you know, they're not going to want you to go. You get, you know, that's the point, you know, you find
totally. Business will find a way to like make room and space and find the
really.
money. Because if you create value for yourself just showing up, you probably are creating some monetization value too in some regard. But yeah, that's awesome. I think that's like all really great tips for anyone looking to get into it. And like really just streamlines the idea that it's hard work, passion, and sort of just showing up.
Yeah, and a bit of
show up every day.
and tenacity. And like, I think the other thing that when I was at BMG, they grew. Like when I was there, they grew from being quite a small company. They were acquiring lots of catalogs and quite aggressively at the time. And their whole philosophy, which I kind of was fascinated by, was like, you just have to knock on the door and ask. I mean, quite a lot of their deals that they did were like, do you want to do a deal? You know, knocking on the door, making a phone call, like being very proactive. And quite often people would be like, it's funny you've called me because I've been thinking about this. And maybe, you know, you have to be tenacious, you know, and proactive and take a bit of a risk, you know.
Yeah, totally. And don't be scared of no's.
Yeah.
No's are just fine. If you ask a question and someone says no, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, just move on to the next thing. Move on to the next door.
Exactly. And because then you know, and you can kind of, someone will eventually say, I mean, obviously, like, you know when you're annoying people, but like, it's a fine line, you know?
Within reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you strengthen like negotiating or presenting or doing anything if you just ask. And sometimes you get a yes, and then you learn from that yes and move on.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty fun. It's a fun job for sure. Every day is a new day.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thanks for joining us. It was
That
awesome
was cool.
to chat and hear your story. And I'm gonna get your band name.
Ah!
What is it?
Never.
Oh, I'm gonna look it up. I'll find it. I'll email you. I won't post it to social. Awesome. Well, yeah, nice to chat and talk to you hopefully soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Ciao.
Bye.